Hello, today we will be making our chocolate scones with the option of using raisins if you do not like chocolate or can't have chocolate. Again, this will be a recipe that focuses on your baking skills. So anytime we do baking, measurement is the actual cooking principle that we will be learning about. So as you can see, I'm wearing my nice apron that is snug. I have my sleeves are rolled up. My clothes are quite snug as well, they're quite tight. And I have my hair is up because it is long. I have no jewelry on. I have no rings on, no necklaces, no watches, anything like that. Prior to starting this video, I washed my hands for 20 to 30 seconds with hot soapy water, as hot as I could stand, going from my wrist all the way downwards, just making sure that we actually drain into the sink and dry with a paper towel. Now we're going to start. So with this recipe and baking, you'll have wet ingredients and dry ingredients. So I'm going to use my large glass bowl, mixing bowl, for the dry ingredients. So we start with 500 mils of flour. So again, if a recipe calls for flour, it is referring to all-purpose flour. So I'm going to get my 250 mils, which is the 1 cup equivalent. I'm going to fill to over full. Go. And then using my spatula, straight edge spatula, I level it off. So I go, there's 250, so which is the equivalent of 1 cup. And then another plus 250. There we go. Which is going to give me 500 mils. If the recipe called for a pre-sifted flour, you would do that prior to you actually measuring. You would sift over a cutting board and a parchment paper and sift a couple times through your actual sifter, and then remeasure. As if you don't, you'll have around 15 to 20% more flour than you need in the recipe. Now the recipe also calls for sugar. So if you hear sugar, it's referring to as white sugar, which is also known as granulated sugar. So we need 60 mils, which is a 1/4 cup. So I'm going to fill my 1/4 cup measure. Now all you have to do is look at the handle of your actual measuring cups, dry measuring cups, because the amount comes in imperial and in metric. Us being in Canada means we need the metric, so we go by the 60 mils. So I'm going to add the sugar, the 60 mils, right to the flour, cleaning as I go. There we go. Next I have our baking powder. So the baking powder and the baking soda this time will ask for 2 mils of each. So what I'm going to do is 2 mils is the equivalent of a half a teaspoon. So I find it says 2 mils. So there we go, 2 mils, fill to 2 mils of our baking powder first. And then I can get a paper towel to quickly just wipe out that paper, that baking powder. And I'm going to need 2 mils of baking soda. Remember, baking powder and baking soda allows the product to rise, and it just depends on what the ingredients are, which leavener you use. So again, find my 2 mils, there it is, fill to over full, and I'm going to level it off. Sometimes baking powder and baking soda can get kind of clumpy, so I always find that if you just pack it down just with the side of the straight edge, back of a straight edge knife or the actual straight edge spatula, you'll be fine. So here we go. And then for salt, I need 2 mils, so that's awesome. Now I'm going to use my whisk just to mix all my ingredients together. Right there, my dry ingredients. Now I'll only use the whisk for the first part of this recipe, because once you add your wet ingredients, it will get stuck and clumped into your whisk, and you'll have to fight to try to get your actual cookie dough or your scone batter out of your actual whisk, which is not what we're wanting. Okay, now we need butter. So what I'm going to do is I'm looking at this is just regular unsalted butter. I'm going to look at the side and you'll see there's measurements on the side. This is what we call the stick method of measuring. So I go, okay, if this is 1 cup, then I know that half of this is going to be 125, which is half a cup, because we need half a cup of sugar, which is, or pardon me, half a cup of butter, which is 125 mils. Now, I'm just going to use my chef knife just to cut that. And then I'm going to use a tool that we call a pastry blender. Okay, and I can actually just place this. So there's a couple options. Because my butter just came out of the fridge, and that's what you want with scones. You want to have a nice cold butter. I'm first just going to cut it a couple times to get the size a little bit smaller, and I can just place it into, right there, the dry ingredients. Okay, so I can go, here we go. And if it's sticking a bit, I'm just going to use a butter knife to take the butter off of my chef knife. So I'll put those away. Now I'm going to get a pastry blender. So a pastry blender is what we use to cut in ingredients together. So right over here, so it's what we use to cut in. So it looks like this. It's a baking tool, and it's so that we can cut pieces of butter or fat into the flour or sugar, so that when it cooks, it creates these nice little steam pockets that will actually help the product rise as well and make it really nice and flaky. And I'm just going to stop for 1 sec. Okay, we're good. So that was my oven preheating. So my oven said, yep, I'm good. And for this recipe, you preheat to 400. And so I'm going to press and turn, press and turn, press and turn, press and turn. There we go. Just trying to equally distribute the butter into your flour. So I'm pressing, turning, and there'll be times where I'm going, oops, I've got some flour that's here with the butter. It's getting stuck in my pastry blender. So you can just use a butter knife to get that out. There we go. Press and turn. There we go. Pressing and turning. So what is basically the actual dough flour will look like small little lentil beans or lentil peas, pardon me. It will look really nice and even, that the butter's been equally distributed throughout the whole flour mixture. Look, my butter mixture, they're really nice and small, the pieces incorporated throughout the actual flour. Need are 160 mils of buttermilk, which is the same thing as 2/3 of a cup. But the first thing I'm actually going to do is that we're using regular milk, and a way to actually change regular milk into buttermilk is just to add an acid, whether that's vinegar or lemon juice or lime juice. So I'm going to add 10 mils of lemon juice right here. So look, I got 5 mils, so I go, I'm going to just put it directly into my liquid measuring cup. So we know it's a liquid measuring cup when it has a pouring spout, which is right over here. So right there is the pouring spout. Has a handle. Graduated markings are on the side. So you have the imperial in the red and blue is metric. So we're metric again. So I'm looking though for 160 mils. But there is no such thing as a measurement for 160 mils on the metric side because it goes by 25 increments on this small measuring cup. So what I'm going to do is go, oh, isn't 80 mils 1/3 of a cup for the equivalent? So if 80 mils is 1/3 of a cup, then 160 is going to be 2/3. So what I'm going to do is just purely get to eye level and pour the remaining milk to make the buttermilk till it hits 2/3 of a cup. So I'll pour till it just reaches the meniscus, which is the markings. So the meniscus just means what the actual measurement is. So it's pretty good here. And then I'm going to add 125 mils of chocolate chips. This is my tip, is that you want to get a dishcloth. You want to get a dishcloth wet. Okay, so it's nice and wet, and you can see right here. What you want to do is you actually want to wring it out. So I'm trying to get as much, so I'm just pulling it, turning it together so that no water comes out. If I was to squeeze it, there's no water. Because all I'm doing is I'm going to put this damp, wet cloth underneath. Okay. I'm going to put it underneath so that I'm not going to, it's not going to slip. Now, I added my chocolate chips, as you see, but I forgot. I'd like to actually just move it together, mix it together pretty quickly. There we go. And then I'm going to put all of this onto my cutting board because I want to knead my dough. So kneading is the process, and let me just get all this here because there's some really damp areas and there's not so much. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that you can use the ball of your hands and you're pressing and turning. Okay. Dough, and I'm going to press it down. So I'm trying to press and turn. There we go. And so I'm grabbing it together. Pressing. And it's going to start to come together like a nice dough. And you can even, like what I do sometimes is if I see there's a lot of flour that's dry, is that I can actually just push it together. Push, push. There we go. And you're not wanting to over mix your dough too many times. You want a nice light and fluffy product. At this point, I'm going to press it down. Make it into a nice kind of semicircle, or sorry, circle. And then you can actually just cut your dough and make it into 6 equal size triangles. So I go, okay, gonna put it straight onto my cutting board. I've got this, here we go. Okay, let me just, so you'll see at the end. So I just divide it in half and then divide those halves into thirds. I look for the egg, so you want to make sure you're looking for the roundest part of the egg, that you just tap it onto the counter gently, pull it apart, put the shells over here. Then I want to make sure, I'm going to get my measuring spoon, I'm going to move that over here. I'll get my milk, I'm going to look for 15 mils, which is also known as 1 tablespoon. Go, filter over full. You always would fill over a custard cup or another bowl so you don't spill the milk. And then I'm going to just use a fork to whisk it up because you really don't need a whisk. You could put a little bit of canola oil if you were vegan on this instead of the egg. And I do have an option of a gluten-free flour mix. So if you are intolerant to gluten, just remind me and I'll make sure that the mixture is available for doing the lab. Now this is a 2-day lab. So the first day you would completely make the actual scones, the doughs, and you would form it in the shape of a circle. And then when we take out the dough on day 2, then you would divide it into the 6 pieces and you're going to bake it in the oven. So the oven is set to 450. I believe it's just it will take, how long? 25 minutes. Hello, I am back. I have taken out the chocolate scones using my oven mitts. Always careful to use that. And I actually placed my baking sheet right on these lovely cork mats. They're heating mats that make it safe to go onto the actual countertop or putting it onto the lovely cutting board. So as you see, my actual scones have a really lovely golden color to them, and you will be able to eat them on day 2 after you have baked them in the oven. So I hope this was informative of how to make our amazing scones, learning about measurement and a refresher on some of the kitchen tools. Thanks so much.